Hi, I'm Adolph Oliver, and this lesson again revisits the order of operations, something, of course, that's very crucial to our work in the algebra. Well, the first thing you need to do is remember what you do first, what you do next, and so on. And so at the top of the whole list of the order of operations is what we normally call grouping symbols. The most common grouping symbols that are used are the old parens, but folks can also make use in handwritten algebra of the square guys and the curly brackets as well. All three of these indicate the same thing. They're all grouping symbols, and anything inside grouping symbols needs to be done first. Okay, once that's taken care of, the next thing going down here are powers and roots. Now, you could call the powers exponents if you wanted. That's the same thing, exponents and powers. And, of course, we gave a quick introduction to square roots. Of course, there are other roots, cube roots, fourth roots, and so forth. You'll see a lot more of these guys when you get to intermediate algebra. Well, you do any powers and roots next. After that, you do any multiply and divide types of things. And the last or lowest in the whole list, of course, any add and subtract. Now, here's the thing that's crucial that you need to remember about this whole business. It's true, of course, that you work your way down in all of these. You do anything higher and then go to the next level on down. But the thing to remember is at each level, the guys at each level are of exactly the same importance. Just because I mentioned powers first and then roots does not mean that powers are any more important than roots. They're exactly the same. The same thing when you get to multiply and divide. Multiply and divide is exactly the same. So here's the thing that folks often goof up on in the order of operations and that you want to make sure that you know correctly. And that is simply this. At each level, you work from left to right. So let's put that down here. At each level, okay, what we do is we go from left to right. So, for instance, if you were at the level with multiplies and divides, and there were a whole bunch of these to do, whoever was on the left, you'd do first, even if that was a divide. Remember, multiply and divide are of exactly the same importance, so the key is you progress from left to right at each level. Okay, remember that. That's the thing that tends to get lost in that PEMDAS that some of you have learned. Best to discard that PEMDAS. It doesn't even mention roots, for instance, and learn the order of operations as we sketched out here. It's not difficult. Let's go over this once more. You do anything in grouping symbols first, and grouping symbols can be any of these three guys in handwritten algebra. Then you do powers and roots. Then you do multiply and divide. Now at each level as you get here, if there's more than one of these guys to do, remember at each level you work from left to right. And then the last thing, of course, the add and subtract down here at the bottom. Now, if you know the order of operations well, it is possible to take some shortcuts to it. But until you learned which work and which don't, it's safest to follow the order of operations exactly step by step. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate to you in the example problems we have coming up. Well, let's start looking at some of these. Here's the first one, not particularly difficult. Now, let's point out something about grouping symbols. We see a grouping symbol here surrounding this -1 set of parens. Well, if there is just a single number inside the grouping symbol, then there's nothing to do inside. Once you get grouping symbols down to a single number, they can then indicate signs and powers and other things of this sort, what's being multiplied. So the two sets of grouping symbols we have here, the parens around the -1 and the parens around the -4, Since there are single values inside, there's nothing to do inside. So we take a look at what else is going on here. We start out with this -1, then we're subtracting something, then we have another subtraction, and then this value right here. Well, all we have is subtracts in this problem, and one of the things we know about add and subtracts is that we can turn around and do them all at once using the old positive and negative parts we've learned if we use the rules to get a single sign in front of each number first. So let's take a look. This -1 in the parens, there's no other sign in front, so that's exactly a -1. The next number here, 1, has a single sign in front, so that is also -1. Now, the 4 here has 2 minuses. Well, we know the rules tell us that 2 minus signs combine to a single plus, and so what do we end up with here? -1 minus another 1 plus 4. Now, of course, you do this in your head, but the positive and negative parts bit that I'm going to remind you about here is just mimicking what you do in your head when you work this up. What's the total negative we have here? Well, 1 and 1. The total negative happens to be 2. This is the only positive guy. His total value is 4. So who wins here? Well, positive by 2. So, of course, the answer here, plus 2. You don't have to put the plus in front unless you feel like doing it, because if folks see that there's no sign showing, they will assume that it's positive. Well, of course, this simple guy here, you could have figured this out in your head, and exactly this is basically what you're doing in your head when you figure that out. Okay, let's now look at something that's a little bit more involved here. This next problem now. Now, first thing, if you've just got parens here, what you have to do is be able to get these guys to match up. It's not difficult to do. Here's the technique. We have left edge parens here, 2 of them. You keep going till you run into one of the first right edge guys, and what you do is each right edge guy, you go back and match him up with the closest left. So these 2 guys right here match. Now, we keep going. Here's another right edge guy. We have to match him up with the closest left that has not already been used, and that's the one going all the way over here. So we see that these 2 parens match and the 2 outer ones match. Okay, well, let's look at what we have now in this problem. There's a subtract, and then we run into a big set of parens that has something to be done. This is not a single number inside, so we've got to work on this first and get it down to a single number. So, just working on the inside of this 4 here has just a single minus sign in front of it, so it is just -4. This second 4 also happens to have just a single sign. It's a minus, so that's a -4. So we end up with -4 minus 4. Well, we keep working on what's inside this set of parens until we get it to a single number. -4 and another -4 just gives me -8. So what we end up with here is inside this original big set of parens, we've got -8. Now, here's the right side paren that's still here. Here's the left side paren that's still there. What I've done is worked on the inside here and got it down to a single number. There it is. Now, go back and copy down all the things that you haven't used yet in this problem. The minus sign hasn't been used, and the 2 hasn't been used. So, where we are at the moment, a 2 and 2 minus signs and then the 8. Well, of course, before you can add or subtract this, you have to get a single sign, so we use our rules again. The 2 minuses combine to give a plus, so that's really a plus in front of this 8. We have the 2 out in front, no sign in front of that, so of course we assume that 2 is positive as well. Well, this is real simple. Plus 2 plus 8 just ends up giving us the answer positive 10, and again, you don't need to put the plus in front of it if you don't feel like doing it. Okay, let's look at another thing, but now involving an exponent as well. Now, here's where you have to be careful. This is an exponent, and the exponent is working on the set of parens right here. But you got to remember that what's higher than powers or exponents is anything in grouping symbols, and notice what's inside this grouping symbol right here is not a single number. So you have to do what's inside the grouping symbol first. That's exactly what the order of operations tells you. So let's do that. 15 divided by 5 just gives us 3. Now, keep the parens around it here that you had to begin with, because that's showing exactly what this exponent 2 is. And of course, we got to copy it down because we haven't used it yet. So what we saw was the inside of the grouping symbols becomes 3. Well, since the 2 was squaring the whole parens here, it's still squaring the whole parens. What we have, of course, is 3 squared, and of course 3 squared means 3 times 3, which of course is simply 9. Okay, well, let's keep looking at things that slowly get a little bit more complicated here. Again, when you have a bunch of parens here, or grouping symbols, what you want to do is match these guys up. Remember, as you're going across, the key is look for the right side guys, and anytime you find one, match him up with the closest left side guy, so those guys match. Here's the next right side guy. He matches up with this guy. Well, here's another right side guy. We have to go all the way back to the start to get somebody who hasn't been matched with yet. So we see we have the big set of parens here enclosing all of this stuff inside. Well, once again, we've got to work on what's inside here first. Now remember, the idea is simply this. What you do now is look at what's inside the set of parens. Here I've blocked off everything but what's inside, and you reapply the order of operations fresh to everything inside here, and then work on that until you get it to a single number. Well, let's look at what's inside. This is a -2. We've got to subtract. Here's a -1, and we've got a power. Well, we have a subtract and a power. The power wins, so I have to do the exponent first. Well, remember, the power, or the exponent, only affects what's immediately in front, which is this parens. So what we have going on here is this is -1 being squared. Well, that simply means we're taking -1 times -1, which of course, when you do that, ends up giving you +1. -1 times -1 is +1. Now, you have to keep that in parens because you see this minus sign in front here? Remember that you do have to have parens separating signs. We have not used this minus sign. We only took the -1 here times the -1 to get the +1. And of course the other thing inside we haven't used is this -2 in the parens. Okay, so here's what I have after I've done the exponent or power. Now we only have a subtract here, and we'll do that, except that we have, of course, have first got to get a single sign in front of each number here. So this minus and plus combines to a minus. So there's really a minus sign in front of that one. The 2 over here has just a single sign in front of it, which happens to be minus. So there's what we have for the 2 guys inside as we've worked on them so far. Well, now, of course, we can combine those into a single number. This is -2, and I'm combining another -1. That gives me a total of -3. So here we go. Now, that's what the whole original parens up here now equals. We worked on the inside using the order of operations just on what was inside. So now we put that in the parens. This is the original right side parens. This is the original left side parens. And of course we've got to copy down anything else that hasn't been used, namely the divide and the 3 in front. So there it is. I've copied down the guys we haven't used yet. Well, okay, here we go. Now we know now in this case that if we have multiply and divide, and there's only one thing to do here, the divide. Once you get down to just one operation left, you don't need the order of operations. The order of operations is only necessary when you have more than one thing to do, and it tells you which one to do first. When you're down to one thing, you just do it. Well, multiply or divide, we can get the sign first. There's a single minus sign, so that means the answer is going to be negative, and of course 3 divided by 3 is just 1. So we end up with -1 being the total on this one. Okay, let's go a little bit further here. Something that's a little bit messier still. Here we go. Now, the first thing again, we want to see how any of the parens match up. Well, out in front, the 5 in a set of parens, we can see that this right guy matches with that left, so that's simple enough. Going on, here's the left guy. Well, we keep going. Here's another left guy. But here's the first right one. Okay, we turn around and connect him up with the closest left guy, so there that is. Here's one more right guy, and he goes and connects up with the other left guy that hasn't been connected yet. So here we go. We've got a 5 in the set of parens here, a big set of parens here with something inside, another little set here, but it has a -1, so the guys that have single numbers inside, there's nothing to do inside, but there is a set here that we have to do. Now notice everything else is lower in importance. Here's an add, here's a subtract, and here's a division. Well, since we have a set of parens here that has something to do inside, it's not a single number yet, that means we've got to work on this first. Well, it's a subtraction, but before we can do add or subtract, if there's more than one sign in front of a number, we have to use the rules to combine the signs. So these two minuses give me a plus in front of the 1, and we just had the 6 out in front, no sign in front of it, so of course we assume it to be positive. Well, we still don't have a single number inside this big set of parens, but we're real close. All we have to do is add the 6 and the 1, coming up with 7. And now we can turn around and bring down the right and left side parens on the original problem. Now, copy everybody else down that hasn't been used here. There's the 5 in parens to begin with. Then we got a +6, a -4, a -8, and a divide by 4. Always make sure that the guys that you haven't used yet, copy them down very carefully. You don't want to lose anybody. If you do, you will not get your correct answer. Okay, now, once that we've done a major step like cleaning up a set of parens like this, a good idea is to go back and call out again all of the operations that you have. Now, here's one thing you got to watch out for carefully here. You see these two sets of parens next to each other? That means multiply. Okay, so there's a multiplication right here. Then we have an addition, a subtraction, and a division. Well, okay, the things of highest importance now are the multiply and the divide. And we have to go from left to right. So we do the guy on the left first, which is the 5 times 7, which gives me 35. Okay, once again, copy down everybody else that we haven't used. Here we are, very carefully, all the guys that were over on the right here. Okay, now let's look at what we have. We've got an add, a subtract, and oops, here's a division. Well, division is higher importance than add or subtract. Now, one of the things you can do here, we of course have recently reviewed how to multiply and divide when we have signed numbers. So you see that negative in front of the 8? Take it as -8 divided by 4, and that combines down to -8 divided by 4 is going to be minus, there's a single minus here, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. Okay, now, copy all the folks that haven't been used. We used that minus sign in front of the 8, but the 4 and the minus sign in front of it, the 6 and the plus and the 35, none of them have been used yet. Okay, so you see how you keep using the order of operations step by step here to be sure that you're doing things in correct order. Well, now we're all down to adds and subtracts, and of course one of the things we know about adds and subtracts, if you've got single signs in front of everybody, which we do, you can use your shortcut of positive and negative parts. Now, once again, you can figure this out in your head, but let me just write down here exactly what you'd be doing in your head if you did that. We're going to figure out the total positive. The 35 and the 6 are the two positive guys. And so that is what? A positive 41. The total negative, 4 and 2, is 6. So I combine the total positive, I combine the total negative. Well, no doubt about it here. Positive wins. And by what? I guess it's 35. So what's the whole thing finally end up equaling? Positive 35. Well, the biggest thing in all of this is practicing how to work with the parens. And here's another example here. The first thing, of course, you got to see how everybody matches up, because when you first look at some of these, you think, oh my goodness, it's a mass of parens. Well, once you see who matches up, it's no problem at all. Remember, you start on the left and keep going right until you hit the first right parent. Here it is. You match him up with the closest left. Here's another right, so the closest left we haven't used yet. It goes all the way out to this guy. Now, the rest of them here, here's the next right, he matches with this guy. Here's the next right, he matches with that. Here's the next right, he matches with that. So, most of these sets of parens, we have single numbers inside, and there's nothing to do inside. But here we have a larger set of parens, and it's not a single number inside, so by the order of operations, we have to work on this guy first. Well, there's a subtract in here, but of course we have more than one sign, so as we've done before, the first thing we do is use the rules to combine those into a single sign. The two minuses give me a plus, so there's really a plus in front of that one. Now bring down inside there what you haven't used, namely the 4. And now all we have to do is add these two together. Let's do it. 4 plus 1 is 5. And that now is what this first set of parens up here boils down to. We work on it till we get it down to a single number. Here's the right side paren, here's the left side paren, and we worked on the inside and came up with 5 for it. Well, okay, the next thing is copy down everybody that hasn't been used. This is real important so that we don't lose track of any part of the problem. Okay, now call out again what the operations are here so you can carefully do the thing of highest importance. And again, watch out for this. You see the parens next to each other here? That means multiply. So this is a multiply, here's a subtract, here's another subtract. So multiply is of higher importance than the subtracts. So we have to do this multiply first. 5 times negative 5 gives me negative 25. Now copy everybody else down exactly as they are if they haven't been used yet. So here are the rest of the guys. Okay, now we're down to just subtracts, but when we're adding and subtracting, we have to have a single sign in front of everybody. The 25 has a single minus, so it's okay, but the 3 has 2 minus signs that we have to combine to a plus. There it is. The 2 has 2 minus signs that we have to combine to a plus. There it is. And of course, don't forget to copy down the minus 25. It had a single sign, so we didn't need to use the rules on it. Well, okay, what do we end up with here? You can do this very easily in your head, but again, when you get down to adds and subtracts, and you have single signs in front of everybody, you can do the old positive and negative parts business. This one's real easy to do in your head, but let me again just write down what we have. The total positive, 3 and 2, that's a total of 5 positive. The total negative is 25. Now remember, I've got it labeled negative here, so that's why you don't have to put the minus sign here. Now, who's going to win? Well, obviously, negative wins, and by 20. So the answer in our original problem here, it boils down to negative 20. Well, as we said, the biggest thing here is learning how to handle all of these parents. So let's look again at something, and the most important thing is how to match these guys up to begin with. So here we go. Remember, start from the left and keep going till you hit a right parent. Here's the first right parent, and that connects up with the closest left that hasn't been joined to anything yet. Then we got a bunch of left parents. The next right parent is this guy right here. He joins to the first left that hasn't been connected. Here's another right parent. He joins to the next left that hasn't been connected. That's this guy right here. And then we have another right parent. He goes and connects to the first guy that's a left parent that hasn't been connected. That's this guy right here. So we've got a series of sets of parents inside, but we're not done. Here's another right parent, and we got to connect him up all the way back with the guy in front. So there we are, the last guy right here, the 4, very easy to see that those connect right there. So what we have here is one big grouping symbol, this whole big guy, with other grouping symbols inside. Okay, well, working from left to right, the first grouping symbol we run into is this great big guy, so that means we've got to spend some time working on this inside here, and what we do is reapply the order of operations fresh to everything inside this. So we're going to take a look at what we have here. Okay, this first set of grouping symbols has a single number inside, so there's nothing to do here. But look what we just ran into. Another larger grouping symbol. It does not have a single thing inside, so that means now we got to work on this guy. Well, let's look at what's inside him. And here we see the -5 in parens. That's a single number, but then -1. And guess what? Here's a set of parents right here that doesn't have a single number. So that means the very first thing that we've got to work on right here is this guy right here. Let's indicate this, and I'll put a little way down here. What happens is, of course, you end up working with the set of parents, the grouping symbols that are buried the deepest. Okay, well, this whole guy here we've got to work on. Inside him, we have this grouping symbol, but it's a single number, and we have a -1. So what's inside of this is -5, -1. Okay, those both have single signs, so -5 and -1 combine to -6. Okay, now let's copy down everything else that's still inside. This, of course, was in a set of parents right here. Here's the right parent here. Here's the left parent that matches it up right here. But, of course, we still have something else inside here, the divide 6, because we were working on this big grouping symbol right here. We got to get it down to a single number. Well, they're not giving us problems too hard here. Remember, in real life, you're going to have fractions and decimals and all of these, but they're being nice to us here. -6 divided by 6, well, of course, there's a single minus sign, and 6 divided by 6 is just 1. So that means that our original set of parents up here, this guy starting on the right here and the left over here, we have now boiled down all the way to -1. So there's the right parent there, there's the left parent there. It took a little bit of work to clean this up. And of course, we're not done here yet. Okay, well, let's copy everybody else down. Let's see if I can do this so we can still see it on the screen here. -2 in front. Then, of course, there's the left parent there. Going over to the right, remember, we got all of this guy. He's the -1. So the things we haven't used, the -1, the -6, the right parent's there, and then the 4 in parents outside. Okay, well, here it is. Let's match these guys up. These parents match here, these match here. They're just single numbers. This right guy here goes all the way back with the guy in front right there, and of course these guys match here. Well, working from left to right, we have this big grouping symbol right here, so guess what? We've got to do that first, and let's work on it. So we just look carefully at what's inside here. Okay, notice we have parents next to each other here. This means multiply. Then there's a subtract and another subtract. Okay, well, multiplication is higher in importance than subtraction is, so officially we've got to do these two multiplies first. -2 times -1, well, the two minuses give me a plus, and 2 times 1 is just 2. Now, copy down all the other guys that we haven't used here. Okay, we still have, remember, we've got to be working on getting what's inside this big set of parents to a single number, so we've got to keep going right here. Well, the nice thing is at this stage, this is all adds and subtracts, and we know we can use positive and negative parts. And again, these are simple enough to do in your head. Let's just go ahead and do that. The total negative here is 7, right? The 1 and the 6. The total positive is 2. Well, if the positive part is 2 and the negative part is 7, that means the negative wins, and of course it wins by 5. So we end up with -5, and now here's the big set of parents that we had originally. Now we've boiled down just to the parents around this -5 right here. Okay, well, what haven't we used yet? You see this 4 up here? It's been patiently waiting the whole time. Now it's its turn to get used. We bring it down. Well, there's only one operation left to do here. These are parents next to each other, which means multiply. And you don't need the order of operations now. There's just one thing to do. You do it. Well, there's a single minus sign, and 5 times 4 is 20. Okay, so this whole guy that we had up here to begin with, okay, we had to work on him very carefully. Identify what parents match with each other, and then anybody inside parents needs to be boiled down to a single number. We had to do that a couple of times to get all the way down to our final answer. Well, let's look at one last of these guys. Here it is right here. Had to make the print a little bit smaller to be able to fit this on the screen. So let's see how we match this one up. Okay, starting from the left, here's my first right parents, so that 6 is just a single number inside of parents. The same thing, this next right matches with the closest left, there that is. But now, the next right over here has to go back and match up with this first guy in front, right there. Now, going further on, here's some left parents. The next right one is right here. It matches with the first left, so there's a single number inside that. Going further over, here's the next right pair, and it matches up with the closest left that hasn't been joined right there, so that's a single number. Then here's another right pair, and well, you got to go all the way back over here to get who it matches to. Let me kind of point at these. There they are. Now, going further over here, here's another right pair, and it matches up with the closest left that hasn't been used. There that is. And the one last right pair in here has to go all the way back and match up with the only left guy that hasn't been used, that guy right there. Okay, well, what this boils down to is one big grouping symbol right here to begin with, and an even larger grouping symbol over here. Well, we've got to officially work these guys from left to right. So here we go. Let's work on the one on the left first. And we look inside here and say, okay, what we have to do is reapply the order of operations fresh to everything that's inside here. Well, let's call out what we see. Here's a multiply, here's a subtract, and here's a divide. Well, multiply and divides are higher importance than subtraction, and multiply and divide is of the same importance, but we have to do the guy that's on the left first. So who's on the left happens to be the multiply here. So 6 times -4, there's one minus sign, this gives me -24. Okay, now we can move over and do this divide over here, and take the sign with it as you do it. Negative 12 divided by 6, well, there's a single minus sign, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. Okay, well, what we have inside this first big set of parens here is negative 24 minus 2, and that's a subtract. Well, we combine those two. Well, they have single signs already. We get a negative 26. Okay, that's what we have inside the first set of parens. There's the right guy and the left guy that I'm writing back down here. Well, okay, we've simplified the first set of parens, but we got this second big guy to take care of right here. Well, let's look at him now. Cover up everything else and just look at what's inside. And what you notice is the first thing we do is bump into another big set of parens here that has something to be done. Then there's a divide and another set of parens where there has something to be done. So we're spending a lot of time cleaning up things inside parens on this problem. Okay, well, first thing we got to do is this set of parens right here, the guy on the left, and inside we have a minus 1 minus a negative 6. Well, there's a subtraction to be done, but we got to use the rules to combine the signs first. The two minuses give me a plus, so there's a plus in front of the 6, and there's a minus 1 in front of that. Remember, the 1 only has a single minus in front of it. Well, this is not hard. Negative 1 plus 6, positive wins by 5, so this becomes 5, and that now is in the first set of parens that's on the inside of this larger one that we got to work with. Here it is. Now, copy down what we haven't used here. Divide, and then 1 minus 6 in parens. Well, we've got to work on this set of parens right here. It's not a single number. 1 minus 6 gives me negative 5. So this guy is negative 5. Copy down the other parts that we haven't used here in that step. 5 divided by negative 5. Well, okay, there's one minus sign, so the answer is going to be negative, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. Okay, so what do we end up with then? We had in this big set of parens up here to begin with, originally a larger set of parens here, which boiled down to a 5. Then we worked on the guy on the right, and we got him down to a minus 5. Then we did the division. So this whole big set of parens we had up here to begin with boils down simply to negative 1. There's the outside right, there's the outside left. Okay, well, let's put together what we have left here. Only the negative 26 in parens next to the negative 1 in parens. If I write that out to make it look a little nicer here, here's the negative 26, and here's the negative 1. Well, we're down to a final multiply. The two minuses can be combined to give us the sign first. It's going to be plus, and 26 times 1 is just 26. So that's the value of this original guy up here once we have carefully worked him all the way through. So be sure now that you practice up on joining up these parens, and remember that you have to do what's inside the parens first. You reapply the order of operations just like we've done in these examples.